I think we'll get started. All right, my name is Craig Strong, and today I'll be talking about Kanban's response to Sprint Zero. So if you're like me, had a huge lunch, a little bit fuzzy from lunch still maybe, but can anyone help me define Sprint Zero? No? I know, the lunch, right? So it's basically getting started. It's the Scrum idea of something you put in front of Scrum to help us get started. But you won't actually find it in any of the official Scrum documentation. That's kind of the thing there. So how can we do better with Kanban? So first, a word about me. I've been a software developer ever since getting out of school in the late 80s. And an amazing book came out around Christmas 1999, Extreme Programming Explained. And I've kind of been incorporating agile methods and practices ever since then. So I own a small consulting company based in New York City and Washington, D.C. here. Our office is in Times Square, right in the Bubba Grump Shrimp building. Yes, we are across from the Naked Cowboy for you New Yorkers in the audience. So we've worked with a number of commercial, federal government, municipal government, and commercial outfits. So right now we are helping the FBI catch bad guys, helping New York City get homeless people back on their feet, and we're making sure everyone can watch Game of Thrones. So that is our mission. All right, so today I'll talk about an experience report for a hackathon we did for USCIS, Citizenship and Immigration Services, and how Kanban really helped us get organized and get started quickly, how that process evolved, and some lessons learned. And then, what are the implications for government programs, right? So it turns out that a lot of the issues that we ran into in a compressed, hackathon situation are really the same issues that you run into on larger programs. It's just the compressed hackathon format shines a spotlight on them, and it shows them in high relief. So some interesting observations there. So some of the challenges that still exist in government procurement, some of the changes, and thoughts about how we can do things better. All right. So what we were doing. So this is for CIS, our mission was to take 10 people flying out of 5 different states from 4 different companies over the course of 3 weekends to build a brand new software application using cutting-edge technology. So I grew up in the 80s, and there's this TV show about a group of misfit programmers, and I think they were attacking some big legacy system. We need to emulate them. Oh yes, the A-Team, awesome. So yes, that's the. So how to get started? So what we did, we came together. We started trying to figure out all the things we needed to do. So we wrote them all down on sticky notes. Just all the things that you got to do to get started, right? You don't even have anything in place. So we started writing sticky notes, and before you knew it, we had a lot of sticky notes. So how the heck do where do we get started? How do we do this? So fortunately, Prince Charming to the rescue. Aggregated personal Kanban was the thing that we used. So here's our first board. So you can see that we have all the team members on the left. We have everything that they're going to work on. There's a big backlog sort of to the left of this. And all the tasks that needed to be done were assigned to people, and they're working on them, getting them reviewed. And we made progress. Yeah, things got done. This is great. So what came out of that? Some pros and some cons, right? That took us through weekend 1 and maybe halfway through weekend 2. So the most important thing is anyone who's been a manager, a staff line manager, when your team shows up on day 1, make sure everyone has something to do, right? So it did that. And everyone could see what everyone else is working on, right? And we were able to capture all the tasks, right? When we figured out new things, we can add and remove tasks all the time. So it just kind of helped us get organized, right? And in those first days of confusion, we didn't even really know what we were going to do, or we were still deciding between technologies. That was really helpful. So thumbs up. So Chuck Norris says, good job. Keeping with the 80s theme there. So what about the negative side? Well, we really weren't measuring business value, right? And there was no real easy way for multiple team members to coordinate together, right, when they needed to work on something together. It wasn't really obvious. The board wasn't helping us do this, right? So, and the bottlenecks weren't really obvious, right? Maybe a task was worked on by one person, and then somebody else took it over, and then somebody else. But it wasn't really obvious from the board that this thing was gumming up the works. So, and we didn't have a real good way to discover what we didn't know, right? So angry boss says, we can do better. So how can we do better? So we put on our Kanban hats and did some Kanban system design. We designed a board, and you can see we have an upstream section where fuzzy ideas are turned into options. We have the commitment point where we decide we're going to work on stuff. We have our downstream where we're actually turning these options into features, into delivered features. And we started defining some of the pull policies, some of the acceptance criteria, if you will, the criteria for when a ticket was ready to be pulled from one column to the next. So this was quite helpful. And this took us through the next, say, day and a half. And on the positive side, we captured our flow of business value. So we could clearly see features getting defined, getting delivered. This is awesome. And it was really easy to coordinate and collaborate. Right? We could see what people are working on, and they're working on stuff together. So that was really good. The bottlenecks were clearly visible, right? If we started to look like we were going to violate a work in process limit, then that was very obvious. So, and there were really, we captured all the different steps, right? So in the personal Kanban board, you can see this stuff's going on, but you don't really know what phase it is or how things relate to each other. So this physical Kanban board really captured all of that for us. So, thank you, Sensei. Chuck Norris approves. But, now, what's interesting is most of the cons here were because of the incredibly compressed time frame, right? So we're trying to do things in minutes, in hours, rather than days and weeks. So has anyone seen or had a terrarium, maybe of ants, when they were a kid? So we were kind of like that. Everybody was getting up and going to the board and back and going, and what we realized is that it was actually an overhead in this kind of an incredibly compressed environment, that literally the time it took for people to get up and constantly move tickets down the board when you have minutes and seconds was an overhead. So that was a really interesting thing. And it's just because of this really highly constrained environment. So really what we realized is that we're running a sprint, right? A hurdle sprint instead of a marathon. So we adapted, and we tried out a couple different tools, not every tool, but we landed on LeanKit. And the good news is that, as you can see, if you remember the physical board from 2 slides back, it's pretty relatively faithful representation of the physical board. So the good news is, certainly compared to some other tools, I won't name, it was fairly easy to replicate the physical board. So that was great. But we did have to learn sort of how to use the tool, right? There was some learning about just kind of how the tool works and what works better and different ways of doing things. So we actually found that we ended up using a red color ticket rather than an expedite lane. And I'm not sure if that's, certainly LeanKit is perfectly capable of capturing an expedite lane, but that just seemed to work out better in our environment for a couple of reasons. The other thing I really liked was there's these little photos. It's little things, right? These little photos showed who's assigned, and the big part was we could assign more than one person to a feature. How many systems have you seen where you can only assign one person to a ticket? This is freaking ridiculous. It's so many features, so many systems are like that. So it was great that we could actually assign 2 people and show that these people are pair programming or are working on this thing. So that was pretty cool. So having worked on that, I should describe what we built. So here's sort of one of the central main features that we built. So it's a peer-to-peer recognition. So in order to, and you recognize this for people who are doing acceptance test-driven development, Cucumber, anyone? Okay. So I want to recognize a coworker to input my feedback. So the idea is you want to give someone a high five. You know, great job, right? And rather than wait till the end of the quarter, you know, to give feedback, you want to be able to just do it right there and then. So you want to say, hey, great job on that presentation, or great job, delivering, meeting this deadline, or whatever it is. And the key of this, one of the key points for this system was tying that back to a company value. You know, and for DHS that would be integrity, vigilance, respect. You know, the key corporate values for Homeland Security. And then the last thing is that you could actually assign them points. And the idea is once you accumulate enough points, you can redeem it for a Starbucks card or some sort of a gift card. So that's the idea, is that people can high-five each other with this peer-to-peer recognition. So another question, so that's what we built. But the other question, well, how could we build something like that in such an incredibly compressed time frame? How could we show, you know, rather than just sort of have one feature and then 8 hours later, okay, that one feature is done. How could we show flow, right? How could we get things going? Well, really the only way to do it is to slice things more finely. So here's just one little example of how we did that. And again, this gets back to, okay, this is an exaggerated example because of the hackathon, but the same kind of thing goes on in the programs the bigger programs that we work on. So taking that same feature, the first version might be, well, you just have to enter someone's email manually. You know, no real validation, none of that, just enter it in. Second version might be a drop-down. Well, what do I have to do for that drop-down? Well, I probably have to have a list of users, which means I probably have to have a user, you know, table in my database, and you know, all of this stuff. So all this other stuff starts to come in. Third version might be, well, actually, I shouldn't be able to give a recognition to myself. Call it a feature, call it an enhancement. And the final version is, hey, let's have type ahead, like Google search, right? So this is how we're, one example of how we really slice things finely so that we could get these tiny little nuggets of value and start to show the flow of them going across the board and get actual metrics and all this other stuff. So that is how we built it. So what this threw into high relief was the sources of delay, right? What slowed us down, right? Because we needed to get going. We needed to start building this thing. What was slowing us down in the beginning, right? So first of all, just getting started. Like, people show up, you know, knowing different things. Nobody knows everything, and nothing's set up. So just using aggregated personal Kanban was a great way to get started. You know, just let's capture some thoughts of what needs to be done. You know, there's some, you know, we're professionals. We know a lot of the things that probably need to get done, right? So let's just start capturing them and put them in a board and start working them. So that was a great way for us to just kind of get the ball rolling. Defining a new process. So the tools for Kanban system design, static, you know, all these different techniques, great techniques. They're so easy. It's just so such a nice way to just quickly and effectively put together and show your workflow. So, and what's interesting here is really we're defining something brand new. So it wasn't so much capturing an existing workflow. So this shows how you can use the same tools to create something brand new. Now, when would you ever need to create something brand new? Well, imagine if you're brought into some government agency and they said, well, we've had a legacy system here for 15 years. Nobody's really touched it in the last 5 years. And we want you to, fix it or integrate with it, right? And you got a new team. You're pretty much starting from scratch, right? There's not really a whole lot there to capture and say, oh, we're going to start from where you are now. You don't have any place to start. So the good news is those same techniques can work just fine in that environment. So mastering new technologies. So nobody on the team knew every technology. In hindsight, yeah, maybe we shouldn't have been quite so ambitious, but something like that always happens, right? There's always new technology. You can't slow it down. So I'm a big fan of these online learning sources. Udemy, Pluralsight. To me, there's been kind of a revolution, right? In the last 5 years, I feel almost like the Matrix, Neo, Do you know how to fly a helicopter? No, wait 1 minute. Okay, so it's just amazing. I personally have taken dozens of these things, and it's incredible how much faster we can learn things than before. I was a huge book reader, still am, but it's really remarkable. So we basically curated a set of these training courses from the different sites and sent them out to everybody on the team before they showed up. So hopefully, if those who did their homework had a good grounding already. But then when they were there, obviously working together, pair programming, collaboration, really, really fast and efficient way to bring people up to speed. So, and again, the board showed us who was pairing, who was working on stuff. So that was awesome. So last thing is, well, how do we get new features out there really, really fast so that we can get feedback, right? Our customers can tell us that we're going the right direction or not, and they'll give us, probably more requirements. So the cloud, huge. Oh my God. So basically, we didn't set up any servers, none of that stuff. Just signed up for, in this case, Azure. It's a huge win. So even if you can't use cloud at all for production, like for example, with the FBI, we're using it only for development and test. Production has to stay in-house. And there's certain things we can't do in the cloud, and we have to use the FedRAMP version and the high security version and all that. But still, it's a huge win. Just the ability to quickly spin up servers and have consistency there, it's night and day. So the last one was the one we really had trouble with, and that is just how do we build stuff more quickly? That's kind of the big. Right, that's the irreducible thing. You can't. You're not. I'm not going to type any faster. So how do I do that? Well, what we thought of is, what if? So, reducing work in process. Right, that's a great thing. Right, that's how when we're done running a marathon, we don't drop dead from exhaustion. Right, that's a good thing. But what if you could start your marathon somewhere between mile 2 and mile 5? Wouldn't that be interesting? So starting with a seed project, we thought of, can we build some stuff, just sort of a basic framework that has a unit test, it's plugged into the DevOps framework, it has maybe login done, maybe a little bit of authorization, a few CRUD screens here and there, just enough, right? So you're not starting from zero. And if you have more than 1 or 2 projects to do, this is going to be a tremendously valuable investment. And again, in this area, there's been a lot of amazing developments that have happened over the last 5 years. So there's a website called Yeoman that some people might be familiar with, where basically people are just creating seeds from different technologies, every combination you can imagine, and just pushing them up there and just posting them for anyone to bring down and check out. So there's a lot out there. Nobody should be starting from scratch. So, and I have a little more to say to that, but first, I did want to say, complain a little bit, indulge me. Some minor tool limitations. So, we couldn't figure out how to represent a multi-level board. Because we talked about how we had features and we had to slice them really thin in the middle, right, to get things done, and we wanted to combine them at the end so that they could be tested as one feature. And for some reason, we couldn't figure out how to do that in the electronic tool. Maybe we just didn't have enough time to really learn that. But that's, perhaps there's better tools, maybe here, that can do that. So that was one limitation. Another one is the LeanKit, it just didn't seem to have a way of representing minimum work in process. So why that's important is we already identified that development was our big bottleneck, right? So at a certain point, essentially there was a whole bunch of tickets lined up in user design is finished and development hasn't started yet. But if we'd had minimum WIP limits, it would have been like an early warning system, like early radar. Boop, watch out, you're going to be starved. The downstream tasks like testing are going to be starved because stuff isn't making it through. So that's kind of a useful thing, and the tool didn't seem to have that. So maybe some of these or all of these might be addressed, but I just thought I'd bring them up because they're interesting, right? There's things to think about. So relating features and stories. So we had certain cases where we have one feature and then there was another feature that came in that took its place, right? So one feature, or we had one feature that ended up being a duplicate. And there weren't really any relationships that we could find in the tool, any way to relate different tickets. So I'm used to sort of bug tracking tools. Bug tracking tools do a great job of this, right? Where you can, and there's some knowledge there, right? If you want to look up something later, oh yeah, we decided to do this one instead, and here's the reason. It's, if you have that information, why would you want to lose that? Why wouldn't you want to keep that? So it was a shame it didn't have that that information there. So. The other thing is, so this is one of my pet peeves. So, hey Joe, you're the developer. So all you got to do, you've got this great tool. When you finish developing your feature, all you got to do is take this ticket and just drag it over into this other column, right? Okay, yep, awesome. 3 hours later, Joe, why are all your tickets still in this column? Oh, I'm sorry, I forgot. Yeah. So what do you get? You get a chart that looks like this. And so wouldn't it be great if I could just go in and say, I'm human, I'm not perfect, I'm not a silicon-based life form. Can I just please, edit this crate on, timestamp to show that this ticket actually happened here or actually was changed here? Can't do it. So it's kind of a pet peeve of mine, tools that assume perfection. Never assume perfection. We're dealing with humans here. So the last one is not really fair because the tools really aren't designed for sub-day time frames. It's not it never advertised itself as a hackathon tool, but it was a challenge we had to address, and so we ended up the timestamps were down to the second, so we were able to export all that to Excel, and then of course did everything in calculated metrics in Excel. So that's just some limitations, maybe might be helpful, something that you might run into here or there. So, so how does this relate to government IT procurement, to other larger government efforts? Like what we're doing right now with the Department of Homeless Services in New York City. Big, huge, 10 different projects that we're working on, lots of stuff. So, so the government is modernizing. So there's some big changes afoot. You probably know about this. So definitely, there's a huge movement away. There's still a few RFPs I see even today that mandate the traditional life cycle. There's still a few, but they're becoming few and far between. So the government is moving to Agile, and in many cases they mandate the use of Agile. It's amazing. So that's a good thing. The other thing that's changing is they're slowly moving from these massive multi-year procurements to smaller task orders. So is anyone familiar with 18F GSA? Yeah, so that's a program where essentially the government is able to just say, I need 2 programmers for 4 weeks, something like that. This is unheard of. This was like not done before. So and it's pretty neat, right? Because you can get a team in there and get something done quickly. So it's kind of hard to consider yourself agile if it's a year later and you haven't even started the project because you're still going through the paperwork. So these things are happening where there's still many challenges, right? There's organizational challenges, procurement, and technical. Lots of challenges. So there's still, there's often an entrenched organizational structure. And what are they optimized for? Like our work with the homeless services, they're really optimized for repetitive execution, right? There's this process, we got to get these services to people who need them. That's a good thing, right? But and in some cases, there's actually intentional inefficiencies, right? Because you've got welfare, food stamps, that kind of stuff, and there have been cases where there's some, bad business going on. So in some cases, there's multiple levels and multiple sign-offs required for an important reason. So we kind of have to, and the other thing, well-defined roles and responsibilities. So imagine coming to someone who has the description of their role, and they're in this grade level, and to get to this grade level, they know it's defined, they know exactly what they have to do, and you're saying, no, please, it's agile, we want you to do this. It's like, well, wait, how is that going to help me get where I need to go? So that's a tough challenge. We still have an annual budgeting cycle. So even if you can get these task orders, right, you still have to somehow imagine at the beginning of the year how much you're going to need, right? So what happens in the middle of the year if you just suddenly discover some amazing new opportunity, some way that we can really change things, but you just didn't think about it, didn't budget for it at the beginning of the year? So that's and there's a significant penalty for failure, right? It's taxpayer money. It's our money, right? So it's okay to fail it's a little dodgy there. So technical challenges, multiple legacy systems, of course, and because these legacy systems are difficult to change, as you know, there's these manual processes and workarounds that have grown up. And obsolete technology. So even if you're developing a new system, you probably have to connect to all these legacy systems, and even that connection can be very difficult to do. So what's a jumpstart strategy for system development? How can we get started more quickly? So what I propose, and what I've seen work, is let's solve the easy. Now there are no easy problems, right? But let's solve the problems we could possibly solve, so that we can focus on the really tough problems, right? So what I mean by the problems that we could possibly solve is Kanban gives us some great tools, right? We can define our workflows, we can work efficiently and reduce overburdening. But let's create some working seed software, right? Let's have our set of automated tests. And I'm working with 10 teams at New York Homeless Services. And they're saying, we really don't know how to write these automated tests. And what they mean is they don't know how to do them quickly, right? They don't know how to do them in the kind of time frames that they need to do them. They can't just sit there for weeks and weeks and work on automated tests. That's not going to work. But imagine if you had a full set of tests all worked out, right there that they can emulate. They can either copy, bring it right in, and extend them. So there's some real benefits here. And we can go beyond that. We can create some shared components. Another amazing thing that's happened in the last couple of years is these JavaScript, web front-end frameworks have really matured, and they have ways of defining components. And those components can point to shared style sheets, to where when a designer changes those style sheets, all the systems that are pointing to those style sheets will automatically inherit the new look and feel. So you could have an organizational look and feel that is really represented across all the systems, instead of what we have today, which is there's 10 systems and they all look a little different. Yeah, drives the designers crazy. So the designers love us. They're like really on board with this stuff. So what are the really tough problems? So there's certain problems that if we can solve them, I don't know how. So please, if you know, let me know. So it's just really tough. Business stakeholder engagement. Just convincing stakeholders that they are stakeholders. I mean, even that, right? And a lot of times in government, there's no one obvious person. You're creating a system that sort of talks to this and talks to that, and it's in this department and that department, and there's a whole range there, and everyone's busy. So just getting that engagement is really tough. It's just a difficult problem. Resistance, like I said, that's a tough thing. That's always a tough thing. And getting to business domain understanding. Let me tell you, shelters and public assistance and all that stuff, very, very complicated. It's really eye-opening how much stuff there is. So, but any business domain is the same. Insurance, all of that. So that's just an inherently difficult problem. And of course, undocumented legacy systems. So these problems are sort of perennial, difficult problems. So if we could, anything we can do on the left-hand side that can give us a leg up, we should do that. So what would that look like? If we were going to create a seed, well, you'd have to do that up front, right? That's an upfront investment. So I just wanted to give an example here, because I was talking about web frameworks. So just as an example, technology is moving incredibly fast, right? And there's been these waves of technology. So don't get discouraged, but you can't just make the investment once and you're done. So what happens is you make the investment, you build this seed, and then you have to, it's like a car, you have to maintain it. You have to change the oil, you have to keep maintaining it. But then, just when you kind of get it to where you want it, throw it away. Because another better technology has come. And you say, well, why would I ever want to throw away this working technology? Well, in each case up here with these web technologies, they represent a quantum leap in terms of capability. I mean, literally you can do in half or a quarter or even 1/10 the number of lines of code what you could do before with 10 times the number of lines of code. And that's really important. That's maintainability. That's the ability to move faster. So that, it's not for nothing. There are good reasons to make this investment and to continue this investment. But it is just that, it's investment. So I put it here, kind of a level of investment. Obviously, it's higher when you're developing a brand new seed, and then it probably goes down as you're maintaining that seed. But how you do this is probably subject of a whole other talk, not this one. But whether you have a team that's doing that, or more likely it's sort of every development team does, sort of enhances the seed as they go forward. But like I said, the technologies now have made this kind of thing really feasible. So, to review, so what are the typical things that happen in a sprint zero? Right, these are some of the typical things. We talked about a lot of them. Some of them are irreducible, but the point is that rather than say, oh, we've got this process, but we can't really get started yet because we don't have our team fully, staffed up. So our sprint velocity would be off because with 3 people and now you've got 8 people, right? You can't really do that. So we're going to call it sprint zero. We don't really need to do that, right? With Kanban, we can start right away. We can use a Kanban method to keep incrementally improving our process. And if we use an application seed, we can start on the 20-yard line, let's say. So that's, so in conclusion, I talked about how the government is adopting agile practices. Everybody knows that now. But the environment remains pretty much agile hostile. Kanban provides a framework for managing both continuous and disruptive change, right? It's not just start from where you are now and let's incrementally improve it. Also, if you have nothing, if you're coming in with nothing and need something to get started, Kanban has the tools for you to do that. And the strategy I recommend is solve as many problems as you can early or upfront, so you can really focus on the difficult problems. And with some upfront investment, we can really make a difference. All right, so that's my talk.